What's that behind him? There, just behind him. Just as Jesus passes in front of you, you see the most bedraggled, grimy group of prisoners behind him in chains. As has been the custom of returning heroes since remotest antiquity, the conquering king returns, and his defeated enemies come in chains behind him in a triumphal procession. And there they are. You see them in chains with their garments shredded from the combat. Their heads are bowed and bloodied. They're the most grisly group of supernatural criminals that you have ever imagined. And they're there in chains behind that stallion on which sits the living God of the universe. Just as he comes to a position right there in front of you, the horse pauses. It's just a pause, just a fraction of a second. All of time, now are you with me now? All of time is being suspended. And in that moment, each of those creatures begins to step out one at a time from among that group of chained foes, and they step toward the curbing where you stand there at the very front of the crowd. Each one attempts in one last desperate maneuver to exert some shred of influence on you from whatever power he has left at his command. First, there's a woman. This woman is more beautiful than anything you've ever seen or fancied in all of your life. Well, the very sight of her face and her figure fills you with an unusual longing such as you couldn't imagine. And yet, when she opens her hands and she stretches them out to you, her hands are covered with blood from the tip of her fingers to her elbow. You're overcome with a sense of revulsion. You're repulsed. You're horrified. But at the same time, you find yourself being drawn just like metal to a magnet. The fight between that sickening inner revulsion and that agonizing pull, that inner pull toward her, and then you realize you felt this response before. What can this be? Swept by an indescribable inner turmoil, you realize this is the very character and sinister nature of lust. Not just sexual lust, but everything you have ever longed for, everything you've ever been pulled toward, and you hated its power to control you. Why, this is the pull of everything that you have ever wanted so badly that you were willing to kill or sacrifice your integrity for or die for. And yet at the same time you dreaded its entry into your life and experience. You suddenly feel yourself being drawn. You don't have any power to resist. It's an agonizing thing. And you ask yourself desperately, well, what's happening here? What is this? Then you lift your eyes to a point above her head to the one seated there on the stallion. He doesn't say a word. He just turns, looks you right in the face. Then he lifts his hands, and your eyes fall on the one man-made thing there. Nail scars in those hands. And out of each of those nail scars, like open pockets on the central hall of heaven, flames something like a laser bolt of power, and it fills you, and you're exhilarated as some strength comes into you. It's as if something was done in those hands, and it affects the way you are in your life. strength, courage, determination. Holiness comes into you, and you're suddenly saturated with a desire for nothing but Him. You turn and you look that woman squarely in the face, and she hides her face in her own bloody hands. Ashamed to look at your countenance, she turns and she retreats into that group of chained foes. The second is a little gnomish dwarf of a figure. Little dude, about as big as the preacher. Little guy. And he's a twisted, bent little creature. And he comes hopping toward the sidewalk, hopping, chattering where you stand, leaping, jumping, madly jumping up and down. And he's an ape-like little figure. And he's laughing madly and a heinous sneer on his face, sarcasm streaming out of his eyes, and at once everything that you have ever done begins to parade across your mind. Every wicked thought, every untoward motive, every sin that you have ever committed in your life, and it sweeps through your mind like a Technicolor movie. Zoom, zoom. You feel bile rising in your throat like something that chokes you, and you can almost feel that little dwarf's fingers on your throat reaching out to choke the life out of you, and you realize who he is. This is guilt. This is all of the condemnation of the corporate universe dancing right there up and down in front of you, laughing, mocking you, glaring at you, reminding you of everything that you have ever hated in yourself. You begin to gag on it, longing, aching to be free of this horrible little creature and this horrible feeling. And all of a sudden, something shatters the air. For the very first time, that magnificent voice of God thunders through the air and arrests the panic. Again, Jesus lifts his hands to remind you of his cross, and he says, "There is therefore now no condemnation." There is therefore now no condemnation. Say it with me. There is therefore now no condemnation. Streams of glory begin to shoot forth towards you like rainbows on rockets. The power of God surges through your entire being, and you turn to look that sneering little grotesque monster in the face. Wounded and defeated, he hobbles back into that cosmic chain gang. The sneer is gone and the sarcasm wiped from his face, and he retreats